Hello, everyone, to episode 7 of Scriptwriting for Beginners. The sun is shining finally here in the UK, so I thought what better opportunity to sit indoors and to have a look at the worst movie scripts, which again wasn't voted by me. I put a poll out there and asked for people's opinions, and the two that came up more so than anything else was Tenet and Twilight, both with Robert Pattinson in it. Not probably the reason why they're poor, but just a little bit of trivia. What I was originally going to do was try to focus on actual movie scripts that were fundamentally bad. But it was very, very tricky to kind of locate them because most of them tend to be either very scripts that haven't been made, or from eras that I suppose didn't have weren't special, at that time hadn't been crafted into the craft that we know now. But what I thought was interesting was this idea that could a script be the reason that the film was bad? I think is the best way of looking at it. The reason people hated Tenet, fundamentally, is because they didn't understand it and they thought it was too complicated. So fundamentally, that is going to be from the scripts. That's the script's fault, which is very, very, very harsh to say because the script could be extremely well written. But is there something in the script that was missing, that didn't tie up the end, made it harder for the audience to follow? Or was it that we as the audience weren't clever enough to understand what Christopher Nolan tried to get across, bearing in mind that he wrote it? And the same thing with Twilight. Twilight being based on the book, how comes the films weren't as respected as other adaptations like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings was? Was this the script's fault, or was this down to the filming, the casting? They all play a factor into it, but I don't think anyone watched Tenet in particular and said, "Oh, I'm not too sure on the casting here." Their main problem with it, and their main concern with the film, was that they just didn't understand it and it was too long-winded. So that's what I thought we'll focus on today. Can a script be the reason that a film is bad? And is it always the case? Now, I'm not going to look at all of Tenet because that'll take me a rather long time. I just wanted to look at the opening page. Now, we all remember in the film how it starts. I wanted just to see if you were reading this for the first time, having not seen the film, and you didn't know who Christopher Nolan was, and this script was blindly sent to you, and you thought, okay, new project by Christopher Nolan, let's see what it's about. Would you get the not saying the gist, because the gist doesn't have to be summed up in the first page, but would you get excited by it? I think that's what I'm going to try to do here. So, straight away, I've noticed there's no scene numbers here and there's no cut to, which for me, I like to have my scenes in order, so we know they flow from one another. So we're set inside an orchestra tuning, audience settling, high officials in glass boxes toast each other, doors closing. So it's very peaceful. Then bam, so juxtaposition from behind the orchestra, terrorists with machine guns burst in. Straight away, within 20 seconds, your action, and that's very rarely. I was going to say cliche, very typical Christopher Nolan. If you think of the opening of Batman: The Dark Knight, you're straight away into that bank robbery scene where you first meet Heath Ledger's character. He doesn't take time into build up anything, and I think, excuse me, hay fever. And I think what's interesting with this is it's only until the end of the film you realise how significant this, excuse me, this opening scene is. It's not what you want when you're doing a YouTube video. It's only really, you only realise how important this scene is when you watch the end of the film. You won't know this now, but I just was pointing that out. The terrorists covered ordinary people. The high officials are held in the boxes. So this is an attack to mainly get the high officials. The ordinary people are kind of, collateral damage as such. Exterior van plaza, downtown Kiev. So we know we're in Ukraine. As police flood the plaza, the driver turns to the passenger. Wake up the Americans. Now we know that. So we know that an American group have somehow infiltrated Ukraine. Are they good or are they bad? We don't know just yet. The passenger turns to the back where 4 black-clad young men sit, waiting. The nearest one seems to be sleeping. Hey. Eyes closed, the young man cocks his weapon, Chamberlain pops it out the side, catches it, opens his vista protagonist. Very, very cool opening. Cocks his weapon, Chamberlain around, pops it out the side, catches it. You know, he's done this before. The protagonist, interesting here, normally a character's name is stated like John, but throughout the whole script, he's referenced as the protagonist. And I think that's true to word in the actual film. I don't think you ever find out his name. The only film I can remember that has similar something to that is like Kill Bill, for example. Is this... I personally feel like this is added... I think, it works its way into the plot in terms of this kind of like secret organisation, this secret military operation. But in terms of getting the reader exciting and to demonstrate that this script is an action genre script, having a character called the protagonist, it's just like he doesn't need a name. He is the unknown man. He gets up to dodgy business, so therefore his name isn't relevant. It adds to the genre. You can't always do this. If you're writing a murder mystery, you could have the killer. But then again, if you're talking from a detective, you can't have the detective. It only seems to work when you want to create a shroud of mystery about who this person is. And maybe, perhaps, I didn't really care who the protagonist was, his background. It just never really mattered what his name was. The passenger nods. Okay. The driver looks down at a variety of uniform patches. Sirens. The Americans shoulder weapons, pull on helmets. A Ukrainian SWAT van screeches to a halt outside the theatre. The passenger spots its markings, tosses the corresponding patches to the Americans, who slap them onto their shoulders. Ukrainian SWAT pour out on the SWAT van. The Americans jump out the back, slipping unnoticed into the stream of SWATs pouring into the lobby. So we know in this opening minute that they are somehow here before the main SWAT. So have they predicted it? These are all questions I'd be asking had I've not seen the film in the open pages. So who are these Americans? How have they got? Why are they here? How are they here before the original SWAT? And depending on who turns up, they're going to pretend that they're there. So are they using this opportunity to infiltrate into the theatre as well? Lobby, concert hall, continuous. SWAT mass at each entrance. The protagonist watches gas canisters brought into the air conditioning system. The SWATs pull on gas masks. Box, concert hall, continuous. A well-dressed man sitting next to a uniformed official looks down into stalls. People slump unconscious in a wave. Now, for me, that is the opening one page, rather than going into second page. It's very, very heavy action. It doesn't leave much. It doesn't leave much undescribed. We can visualize it. We know it's all go go go. Which again, if you're writing something that's an action genre, first and foremost, you have to start with a bang. And what better way than a terrorist, attack and SWAT team infiltrating? Then when in that, you add in this mystery of who these guys are by having not only a character called the protagonist rather than a name. You have this unusual bit about them, deciding what badge to stick on their armor to show that they've done this before, but they're not operating on the same rules as any other military or police force in any of the countries. As far as we know from this page alone, there is no mention of time travel or any science fiction element. So what is it that, as the film goes on, if it was explained in this sort of manner, would it make more sense to the audience? Now, if I was to fast forward at a random scene, there we go. Oh, how spooky is that? So this is what I'm saying about how important that moment is. So we know it's relevant to the opening scene, but I don't personally think that this came clear. I remember hearing that scene, but if you look at the dialogue, it's very much... I think with science fiction and time travel, you have to establish the rules, and I don't think Tenet did that as such. Now looking at Twilight, let's see the opening page here. They have a few different things. They have, scene changes, which is only because it's adaptation from a book that you need to worry about that. Exterior rainforest, Olympic National Park, Washington dawn, moss draped, shadow drenched, tortured tree trunks twist upward, reaching for rare sunlight. Now, for me, that is almost like reading a novel again because it's based on a novel. It's unusual to have that kind of description in a script writing. It's more of a manuscript. However, I'm here for it. I liked it. I think it not only does a purpose of describing this forest to a T, it also just makes it more enjoyable to read for a change. And I think don't be afraid to write in the style that you enjoy. If you're a little bit more descriptive than fact based, like John Sitz, do it. Personally, voiceover here, meaning she's not in the scene, she's talking about it. I never thought I'd never given much thought about how would I die. So straight away, if you hadn't seen the books, or read the books, or knew anything about Twilight, you would assume that this girl Bella is talking about, she's talking in the past here about how she died. Suddenly, every creature in the forest is deadly silent. Neither bird, beast, nor insect make a noise. A predator is near. Then in the distance, you hear a tiny snick, a twig snap, and abruptly we're on the move, fast. Unknown point of view, moving. Trees start whipping past us at dizzying speed. Branches are dodged with preternatural agility, and we're speeding, chasing something. A deer, running for its life. This maze of a forest that sprints forward again. Beyond the deer sees the forest edge. Buckrace survives just behind it, about to emerge from shallow darkness. The deer leaps into how of Sam. Then bam, the deer abruptly plumps out of the frame, an unnaturally angled, leaving the white glare to fill the screen. Hold on the whiteness, but dying in the place of someone I love seems like a good way to go. Then in the whiteness steps the face of Isabella Swan. Eyes closed against the sunlight, absorbing its rays. Long dark hair frames. She's vulnerable, introverted, in perfect beauty. So I can't bring myself to regret the decision that brought me here to die. The background comes into focus and we realise we're now in... Interesting. It's very, very poetic. It's very... even the lines here. But dying in the place of someone I love seems like a good way to go. So I can't, place meaning taking place, not the location. So I can't bring myself to regret the decision that brought me here to die. It's very poetic. You can understand that if you're not a fan of this type of genre, which all has, it's straight away we know there's a supernatural element to it, by the, preternatural agility. But then we'll also know that there's a massive love element going on here because she's mentioned here, and here. It's very philosophical. So reading this, I don't think you're then going to expect to have an action film of a supernatural element. Now, obviously, Twilight does have action, but it's not action in the same way as, say, The Lost Boys, like a vampire element. In contrast, if you look at how that's described to, she's described the forest. He hasn't described the orchestra, the theatre as such. He's just said the plaza and orchestra tune, audience settling, high officials, glass boxes toast each other, doors closing. It's a very basic way of explaining what's going on without much description. The only bit of description we get of what they're doing is they're settling in and they're toasting each other to one another, and then terrorists bash him. Now, look here. All this action here, the passenger sorts markings, they jump out, they gather at the entrances, throw gas canisters, blah blah blah. Compare that to here. Trees start whipping past us at dizzying speed. Branches are dodged with agility, and we're speeding up, chasing something. What is more enjoyable to read? It's, on the one hand, you've got one here that's very, very descriptive and very, very novel, prose-like, very novel-like. You're on this journey of movement, which I definitely feel like it comes across. And yet this one is very much fact-based, and I don't really think you get a sense of being on the move with them. Ukrainians pour out the SWAT van, the Americans jump out the back of the van, slipping unnoticed in the stream of SWATs pouring into the lobby. You don't have any of this, just extra added on description. And that's because I guess it's either, the different genres, which I think plays an element, or it's purely the writer. Now, it's very tough to say from both scripts examples, is this the problem that, that the script, was the script the film's problems, or why nobody liked it? But I'm going to look at, for next week's episode, I'm going to look at the opening pages of the script, The Matrix, the first film. Now, bearing in mind it's similar to Tenet in its confusion as such. People weren't, but loads of people liked The Matrix because The Matrix was easier to follow, even being a heavy action science fiction film like Tenet is. So, on contrast, I want to see if there's any differences that Tenet does that Matrix does, and vice versa. Showing you that why is it that Tenet did so badly, even though the script could have been written the same way as The Matrix, for example. I don't feel this lesson was too much learning, and I apologize if you couldn't follow. I just wanted to firstly say that these two films were voted poorly amongst my listeners, even though the script itself is laid out nicely, and so is this one. But for some reason, as they continued on, people didn't enjoy the films. So can the script be to blame?